Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Healthy University. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I have a really special show today. I tell you, I'm very curious about our guest today and what he does and how he does it. So today we have David DeWitt, and he's a certified professional graphoanalyst by IGAS, the International Graphoanalyst Society, who shows how you can get a grasp of the fundamental rules of handwriting analysis and find out about yourself and others. And he just wrote a book about bullying and applying handwriting analysis to detect potential dangers and signs and effects. And that's what really got my curiosity up, because we were talking a little before the show, and there are things that we show, and I never thought about handwriting. And since you're the specialist, David, first of all, welcome to the show. And second of all, what is it you do? What is handwriting analysis?
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Alan for having me on your show. As I mentioned to you before, podcast is a new adventure for me. But anyway, answering your question on handwriting analysis, basically it is a study of individual strokes in the handwriting sample to determine the person's physical, mental, and emotional state at the time of the writing. Once he writes the sample, it's called frozen writing. And these are unfixed traits because your physical, mental, emotional state changes every day. I mean, take, for example, if you're in a car accident, I'll use that as an example, because it brings on anxiety, or if you're in a trauma situation. The first thing you feel is, if you cause the accident, the first thing you're going to feel right offhand is, I hope nobody's hurt. You have that fear, and as soon as you find out the person is well, your whole anxiety changes, your feelings change. And this is basically how handwriting is, because people say to me, my handwriting changes. It definitely changes every day. And whatever sets it off, whatever emotional trauma or whatever happens in your life, or how you started the morning off, if you had an argument with your spouse or whatever, that's going to make how your day is going to go for you. So basically, handwriting analysis, like I said, is just, it shows a lot of energy, and it's called brain writing, and it just, it shows how you're going to act emotionally each day of your life, and it's carried on by your brain into your hand. So your motor skills carry over. Of course, we have the big thing today, Alan, is, a lot of people have abandoned, the pen and paper for the computer, but we still, as long as we can get some writing, it could be, print, but we prefer cursive because it makes it easier to analyze. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and I guess the interesting thing is, at least, and I don't know if you've done any of the court work or work at to deal with crime, but they say we all have a unique style of handwriting, and so that's a part of it too. It's a part of our traits, right? Just like we have unique DNA, we have unique handwriting styles.
Right. Well, everybody's signature. Basically, you spend more time on a signature than your basic handwriting, and your signature is what we call your public image. This is how you portray yourself out to the public. We usually don't analyze the signature by itself, because some people exaggerate their signature. They want to puff up their chest and look better than they actually feel. And a lot of times a person, if you just use your signature, for example, if your name was, let's say, Howard Clark, you don't have no descenders going down, so we can't look into the area of the bottom of your handwriting to see any material imagination, if you like people, how you feel, act, and all your desires. So by itself, we don't want to usually use it, but we've combined it together to look at it, because, for example, if your handwriting and your signature are about the same, it shows you don't put on any airs for anybody.
Interesting. Yeah, and like I think about my signature, and I think a lot of people, a lot of men probably are quick signatures, and then I look at a lot of women and they have a little nicer signatures. But I'm conscious that I of my A and the N on my first name, and then I do a nice E, and then the rest of it's sort of scribble, and then I bring the G all the way around, so it kind of goes over the whole last name with, and then I put in a dot where the I should be, but there's no. It would be impossible to tell what it is, right? Most of us have a signature that no one could really read very well.
Usually, Alan, you just mentioned an interesting point, because usually when you bring your signature up and it covers your last name, you want to protect your family name. When we look at your signature, we look at, is the first name bigger than the last name? Is it the person's more interested in preserving his family name? So when you bring it around like that, it means that you want to protect that family name. Interesting.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're right that it's getting harder and harder. I mean, I know there's even talk that schools are going to get rid of cursive, and I'm like, well, how are people going to learn to sign anything? But
it's true.
But what I think interests me is what led you to this? Is this something that's sort of been in your family? Like when I was looking at careers myself, this never was on a radar that I ever saw. So how did you get interested in this, and how did you end up making it your career?
Well, it's kind of an interesting point, because I was in the Army Intelligence Corps, and I was ready to get out of the service. I only had a few short months left. And my company commander asked me we lost our mail clerk. We were waiting for another to come, if I would just handle the mail. And at that point, I had a book from Dell on handwriting analysis. I didn't really believe in it. I want to just point that out. But anyway, there was a serviceman. Every time he kept getting a letter from his girlfriend, I noticed his name got smaller and smaller. So I got my book out, and if you really like somebody, you will embellish their name. So I said to him, I hope you don't get a Dear John letter. And I left it at that. And about 3 months later, he came and he said, Dave, I got the Dear John, and I felt real bad for him. So then I started to analyze everybody's handwriting for the short time I had left, and I thought, gee, I wish I could use it here when I get out of the service. But it never caught on big here. In European countries, a lot of places like Israel and places like that, 85% of your you go get a job, you're going to get your handwriting analyzed.
Interesting.
But it never caught on here, so.
Yeah.
So anyway, I used it. It did help me, though, because I could see I got in the insurance business, and I knew who I could sell and who I couldn't sell just by looking at their handwriting. So I never took no for an answer. I'd look at it, I knew where I was going with it.
Right, just based on those. I mean, that's really interesting, and yeah, I do a lot of work with the military, and I think you think about all the other interesting things that were done during wartime to detect. And I always think about the story of if the Germans during World War II thought somebody was a spy, they'd invite him to dinner, and they'd see if they put their was it the knife in the right hand or the fork in the right hand, because everyone in Europe puts the fork in the left hand no matter what. And I always thought that's so fascinating, is these like little things that they use to detect, these traces of that. And I'm sure handwriting plays an equal part in that.
Right.
If somebody is writing under duress, like I imagine if, today's world, if a terrorist was forcing a captive to write, a letter, you could almost tell just from the way it's written that they're either lying, they're not, or they're under duress. It's, they're shaking, and all of the other things that would go into them writing that and not being truthful about what they're writing.
Yeah, you made a good point, because a lot of handwriting analysis, I mean, if you like somebody, you lean forward. So if your writing bears more to the right, you're more extroverted, more outgoing, more impulsive. If you write straight up and down, you have your objective. You wear your head over your heart. And if you bend way far to the left, you're more self-centered, more withdrawn, that kind of thing. If you write uphill, it's optimistic. You write downhill, it's pessimistic. So a lot of traits are very universal in your handwriting.
Wow.
And matter of fact, there is a graphologist, a very famous one here in the United States, Andrea McNichols, who lives in California. And she spends a lot of time in the courts, and what she does is use reverse psychology. Say there's 10 suspects that robbed the bank. If you put down that I did not rob the bank, you got in your subconscious, you can't lie to it. So you'll put a space, and she's picked out so many people that done crimes, and she's well known throughout the United States, especially in the group I belong to.
Wow. Yeah, see,
Yep.
that's what's so fascinating is that there are all these fields, and I'm sure lie detection and all that. They use all these machines, but the truth is, I always say you can watch people's eyes. When someone lies, they usually will drift their eyes as well. And there's actually, I talked to a neurologist who specialized in eye movements, and there's different kinds of eye movements depending on, like, you could have an illness, or if you're having a mental illness, there's certain eye movements that they'll make that they won't make otherwise. And she actually, I had a friend who had an autoimmune disease, and she actually identified that he wasn't mentally ill. He was having this disease because of the way his eyes shifted over. It's these little traits. So what brought you into wanting to write about bullying? Where did that, like, at what point did you go, there's something there?
Well, what happened is back in 2015, my wife said, I want to go to a local church. I want to hear this man is going to be talking about, bullying. And he had spent the day in 2 high schools talking about it. And she said, I just would like to hear about it. I wasn't, my children are all grown up. And I thought, well, she wants to go, I'll go listen. But I was so inspired by his powerful talk. His name is John Halligan, and his son, Ryan is a victim of bullying. And I listened to John. I was mesmerized by him. I mean, the church was packed. I mean, there must have been 1,200 people there. And a lot of the young people asked great questions. And I got talking to him because he mentioned he worked for IBM. He took his son's computer apart. He couldn't find any suicide notes or anything in that area. And he couldn't understand why this happened to his son. And when I got talking to him, I said, did you look at any other pieces of paper? And he said, why? I said, well, I'm a handwriting expert. And I can see trauma, I can see emotional signs and all these kind of things. So I got thinking about it, and I said, gee, why don't I I've been doing this for so many years now, and I had written another book before this. I'm going to try to put this together and see if I can put the trauma signs and find out the different signs that affect people that have been bullied. So I did some research, and I found 2 people, actually, graphologists throughout the world. One actually in South Africa, a teacher, and she wrote a book, School Bullying, and she's, like I said, she's a teacher and graphologist by the name of Sandra Fisher. And then I found another book out there called Unlock, awesome book, by Yaakov Rossignol out of Brooklyn, New York. And I guess, from what I understand, he's a life coach, and of course he's a graphologist too. And he works with teenagers on 4 schools in the area down there, and if they got a problem, they call him. And his book was awesome. So I got in touch with both of them, and they said, let's spread the word. Let's see if we can help people. And if you need anything, because my biggest problem was getting, samples from bullies and so forth. And they said, take whatever you want out of our books, Dave, and use it. So,
wow.
So I put the book together, and I tested it last year to make sure I was even close to it. There's a school up in Massachusetts, in Northampton, Hampton Regional. I've been going up there several years. I read the kids' handwriting before I come, and I noticed when I had one of the samples, I saw the trauma signs. I saw so many signs of being bullied in it. I said, I'm going to test this out. So I mentioned I'd been coming to the school for 12 years. I said I'd never talk about negatives. I always stick to the positives. But I also see trauma and emotional signs, and I continued my talk and finished with that class. And this kid came over to me and said, he said, I noticed when you got to my handwriting, you mentioned trauma and emotions. Did you see something in my handwriting? I said, do you have your sample? And when he handed me the sample, I said to him, you see this sign in the handwriting? It was a G that leaned way far down and to the left. It's a trauma sign. And I said, you're being bullied, right? And he shook his head, and I told the teacher, keep an eye on this kid.
Wow.
And so I knew I was onto something.
Well, that's really, it's like unbelievable. It's very fascinating. And so we have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I definitely want to talk more about, I think, what else you found as you wrote your book, and I think maybe even what I had no idea there were multiple books out there. But what you find in this work that you do as a graphoanalyst about bullying, and particularly, I guess, let's talk about what the bullies are showing as well. I'm sure you got some of that. So if you'll just hold on, we'll be right back with more Healthy You. Hi, and welcome back to Healthy You. This is Alan Eisenberg, and I'm talking with David DeWitt, who's a certified professional graphoanalyst, which is about analyzing handwriting. And he's written a book called Bullying, Applying Handwriting Analysis to Detect Potential Danger Signs and Effects. And I think when we left, we were talking about, sort of what you see from bullying victims or bullying survivors, as I like to refer to them. But what does that start to look like? Like, you were saying like introversion versus extroversion, or what did you notice as a trending aspect of that?
Well, actually, when you look at, if you see an extroverted child, usually they're surrounded with a bunch of friends, and they usually they receive, if somebody's technically bullying them, they don't take it as to heart as somebody that's more introverted, more not as sociable type of person. It's more of a loner kind of person. I mean, you have to look at what makes a child unhappy in school, and I think the school environment itself can be stressful. A teacher can be demanding, too strict, or insensitive to the child's needs. Or for various other reasons, a child feels inferior to, their classmates, the child feels left out socially, or the child is shy. I mean, usually that's what you see in introverts. And the child's not coping academically is another big problem that you might find. So
right,
these are some of the problems you see when you look at it. And what you're looking at, for example, in a victim's handwriting, one of the things you look at is the size of the handwriting. That's the smaller it is, the more introverted the person is. It shows like timidity or whatever. Then we look at the T-bars. The T-bar is the strongest personality trait in handwriting. There's over 100 different ways of making a T. The higher you go up on the T stem shows the ambition. Your willpower is stronger if they're strong crossing on your bars. So usually when you see a victim's handwriting, the T-bars are placed low on the T-stems, or the pressure is very light. And then you have very low key, and the personal pronoun I is a very important thing when you look at anybody's handwriting. This is your personal self-image. Now, if you make them real small, and it's hard to explain it to you, Alan, because actually handwriting is divided in 3 zones. You have an upper zone in your handwriting, which is the abstract imagination concepts and philosophies and so forth. But the middle zone is your lowercase letters, and that's the now and here. That's what we call the mundane area. Most high school kids usually fall in that area. And then the bottom zone has to do with people, places, and things, and desires, and maybe I shouldn't say it, but a house is a libido area. So, But anyway, so when you look at handwriting, you got to look at, is it equal all the way through, or is it in one area that everything is going on in a person's life? If you see big Y's and big G's, usually a person wants a variety of change in their life. But usually with a victim's handwriting, they have very small, like the senders, like in their G's. They like to be, they're like loners. They're lonely kind of people.
Right.
And they're the more that somebody's going to bully on them. Where, for example, a bully's handwriting is more aggressive. Is much heavier, and this uneven. It's like, we call it roller coaster writing. I don't know if this helps you any, but that's some of the signs that we see in the handwriting that stands out.
So I would think like that a bully or someone might be pressing harder as well. There might be an anger aspect to it.
Right.
And you might even find that with victims where the pressure, let's say they're using a pen or a pencil, it's the pressure is harder, and you can detect, lighter versus darker coloring based on that as well. Right.
And and the thing is, of course, we always like to know what they're using. If they're using a ballpoint, if they're using a pen type, kind of instrument. But what you're saying is correct. When you look at the handwriting, first of all, you're going to be looking at other things in the handwriting, like the margins. This is where you like to hang out. You feel comfortable, like the left margins in the past. So some people never move out of their past because they got things going on in their life. They never get to the future, which is on the right-hand side of your page. So we got to look at where they're coming from, the size of their handwriting, how their handwriting is slanting. Usually if it slants to the left and it's just, say, for example, there's no loops in the handwriting. Yeah. This shows that you're actually pulling in your emotions. You don't have the emotions. You don't have all the friends around you. And usually if it slants to the left, it's usually slanting towards, it's going to sound weird to you, but to the mother's side. If it slants to the right of the paper, it's the father's side. And and the pronoun I tells you the way it's made. We were taught to make a loop in the top, which is the father part of the handwriting. And I'll take that back, excuse me. The upper part of the handwriting has to do with the mother, and the lower part looks like a cradle, has to do with the father. Now, a lot of times, if you see the pronoun I leaning to the left, they're kind of withdrawing themselves. If they write it straight up and down, they want to be independent. They don't want the control of the parent. So we look at all these different things in the handwriting to determine where this person is coming from. It could be a child, it could be an adult. Yeah. And a lot of times even young people have mature handwriting that looks like adults' handwriting. You see older people write like children also. So it's really hard to tell, like the gender, stuff like that. We can't tell the future. It's not a cult. We can look into the past and we can see where that person is actually coming from, what's affected them.
No, but there's definitely, it sounds like a lot of psychology, almost like Freudian psychology within handwriting.
Oh, definitely.
There's a whole psychology aspect that, it's just fascinating. I definitely have heard about it, in situations of duress or criminal cases. But, I think what's fascinating is that you're taking bullying, which is duress, another duress situation, or even maybe at work, people under stress and duress at work who aren't really confident about what they're writing, you could detect that they don't have that level of confidence to do what they're being asked to do. There's so many ways. I'm just sitting here going, wow, you could really use it, like you said, in relationships. I'm sure there's like a way to go. Okay, is a marriage going well based on the way the husband and the wife write?
That's definitely. We have, matter of fact, when we take to get certified, we have to look at a husband and a wife situation and see what contributing factors are involved in the handwriting if they're well for each other. And it's really interesting because one will be stronger than another in a different animal. And a lot of times if you have a real aggressive person, it's a business person, but his wife might want to take a back seat. She might want to make him better, and she doesn't care about all the glory that goes with it, So, and you could tell a person who, they want the attention brought on them just by their handwriting. It's really interesting, different traits in the handwriting that tell you all these things.
Yeah. So have you ever, with the bullying side, are there schools that actually ask for any of that analysis to happen? Do they actually use that as any?
Well, the one I mentioned was the one that wrote Unlock, the book in Brooklyn. He's from Brooklyn, New York, as Yathal Rosenthal. But he goes right into schools and helps them out. And in his book, in the beginning, they mention a lot of things about it. And, of course, my book now has come out, and a lot of people don't realize that through handwriting, I want to get in there in the early stage, and maybe I can help somebody before it goes to, a bad situation. I mean, I've had, for example, since I've been researching, I've heard some real terrible ways that people have been bullied. For example, I'll give you one. This one really got me. Somebody's friends set up a Facebook account, but put a girl as and he was saying all these things he felt for this girl, and they were sending it viral all over the place. You know what I mean? And this person, from what I understand, was ready to take his life, but the parents acted upon it soon enough, and it put a stop to it. So there's, the Facebook's one of the worst places that I think, or any of that,
Well, one of the worst stories about that, and I don't know if you caught it when it happened several years ago, was a girl's mother, like the bully's mother, actually made a fake profile as a boy and started, acting like they liked this girl that the girl was bullying, and then, told her to go kill herself, and she did. And it was the mother of the bully who made this fake identity, and they tried to prosecute her, and they had nothing to prosecute her on. And it's like you just sit there and you go, is that really happening? And, not to talk about my new book, but when you read Crossing the Line, I kind of threw some of that stuff in there, like, because it's really about what does it take to take someone to that level and as you learned when you started on this quest with Ryan Halligan's father, he's been doing this for 10 years. It doesn't go away. And he still, every day, I'm sure he still wonders what happened. What could he have done different? What were the signs that he missed? And it's a really sad case, and people can look up the Halligan case. It's very famous. And, he's just made his life, now going out and talking about this in hopes of stopping somebody else from doing it. But it's like you said, I'm kind of the same ilk. I'm about recovery. I want to stop people from doing things, children from either growing up harmed, catching it early and getting them help, or stopping from these really bad things that can happen. I mean, we have 11-year-old kids that kill themselves at 11. And I'm like, at 11, but I think back to my own story, which is in my first book, and it's like at 12 I was, doing stuff I shouldn't have been doing. at 12.
Right.
And when I had my kids and I looked at them when they were 12, I thought, I can't believe, that I got taken to that point and it happened. So, I think it's great that you focused on it, that, something inspired you. And obviously there is some validity to this interesting, fascinating to me, idea of handwriting. And in fact, of course, it's probably getting harder because there's less true handwriting going on. And now you have to try to interpret when people write on a computer or on a keyboard and try to read emotion into that, which is, I think, a very difficult.
Almost impossible,
yeah.
Yes.
That's what I talk about with people at work. I'm like, you've got to not read things emotionally, because you have no idea when someone was writing, what they meant.
When I do some talks, I actually start my talk out with, wouldn't you like to have a tool? You come to a meeting and everybody at that meeting, if they're team players, especially for businesses and so forth, if you look at it, what everybody's thinking around you. And a lot of people don't realize everybody's probably carrying some cross or has a problem in their household, but they don't want to reveal it. They're very private because you could see deceit, you could see secretness in handwriting. Everybody has some secretness. Maybe their life is private to them. They're not going to blast it out there. And this way you can look around and you can get an idea, well, this person, he procrastinates all the time. There's always a positive and a negative trait to every word. Mm-hmm. So when I wrote both my books, I show the positive. Like, say, you have somebody who procrastinates, maybe his procrastination, everybody wants to jump on something today, but maybe tomorrow, because you procrastinated and held off a day, maybe it would have been better to wait. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then you talk about, loyalty. Even criminals are loyal to their friends, so you'll see that in handwriting too. Or, sure. For example, if you work for the FBI, you might see lying in there because that's part of their job, not to divulge all their secrets, So it might come normal to them. You follow me?
Yeah, yeah. So, they adapt themselves to that.
And they don't feel guilty about it. You follow me?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's why I say, that's why that lie detectors have never been able to be used in court, because if people believe there's no way to be sure that they're either telling the truth or lying, because some people can convince themselves otherwise. Well, we're coming to the end of the show, and I like to ask my guests one question that I hope it's not too much of a surprise, but it's just really something that I think I like for people to think about, which is when you think back to your youth, when you think back to your younger days, with what you know today, with the hindsight that we have today, when would that be, and what would you tell yourself that might have changed the way you thought when you were younger?
Well, of course, I did mention to you that I was in the last orphanage in the state of Connecticut, and I saw abuse, from a little kid. I went in there when I was 4. They only took you after you were over 4, and I got out at 9.5. So it closed up in 1956, but there were older boys, and there was always fighting, always bullying. What was good for one was good for all. You never went against another one. You learn these things when you're younger. I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but
no, it's interesting.
But I saw it myself, but I never thought much of it till after I wrote the book, because I always put it behind me, because I left to go into service. I left school early. I went in the Army 3 days after I was 17, and I never looked back. And but sometimes it hardens you. You see a lot of this stuff. It hardens you, so you're not always affected, or you put it in the back of your mind, like you said, Alan.
Yeah.
So it's since I wrote the book, I started thinking about this. Now I said, "Gee, wow, there was really a bullying situation there, and I was involved in it." And I look back. Of because I never got along with my father. He was very kind of brutal to my sister. And when you're young and you're young as that, you don't think about it because you want to please your parents. And I was always trying to please them. You follow me?
Right, and then if you have abusive parents or abusive family, you can never get that. You can never get to the point of pleasing them. Yeah, so you keep trying.
but I made a vow that I would never be that way. I have 8 children, that I would never be that way. Some people in my family say I'm an enabler because I go overboard sometimes for things. But I'd rather be close to my children, and I can't understand why somebody can't love somebody, and why they would do the things they do. So this is a question I ask myself quite often. How can you love somebody and do the things you do,
Well, and that's something I always talk about as well, which is like if you can understand why somebody does some heinous crime or murder or terrorism, then you're already thinking like them. So the good thing is to know you think that's terrible, right? Because it's not the way you want to treat people, and it's not the way you would think that people should be treated. And that's something I always tell people. I'm like, if you can understand those kinds of things, then you have to wonder why you can understand those kind of things. Because, it shouldn't be easy to answer. We shouldn't be. It shouldn't be easy to go, I can see why that person murdered that person or committed that crime or did whatever. It should be difficult for us because it's not something we would do. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for your honesty. I did not know about the orphanage, and I imagine that was hard. And it's like you said, I
usually never mention it, Alan, but I got thinking about it, and I was thinking of when you pulled up something there. You had a hard childhood from what I could tell, and I was thinking, wow, I always put it behind me. I never wanted to think about it, but I had a sister, but she's to this day she's still traumatized, still bothered with it, and she was in the orphanage. She was older than me, and it still bothers her to this day.
Well, I think
my father treated her so bad.
And I think the hardest thing that we have to realize, and I talk about this and have written about it many times, which is, the past, there's nothing we can do about the past. There's nothing I can do about what happened to me. There's nothing you can do about what happened to you. There's nothing anyone can do. Once it's happened, it's happened. And you have to, the hardest thing that I think we have to do as on a personal level to get forward in life, and I do life coaching now, so it's all about trying to move forward. But you can't move forward until you've forgiven the past. And that doesn't mean you're going to get forgiveness from the people who hurt you. You're just going to allow that forgiveness to be in you and forgive. Yeah. It's really within you to say, I'm letting it go. It happened, and I forgive the people because there's nothing you can do. You can't change it. And you probably won't get to talk to all the people that you would want to talk to.
Most of them are all gone now.
Right.
But anyway. So I think you're definitely right about that.
So I appreciate that.
Get it,
And that's the big lesson. The big lesson in anything, I think in psychology or the mental health world, is you're either suffering from your past or you're worrying about your future. And those are the two things that you have to get under control in order to move forward, because they're just going to haunt you otherwise, or they're going to worry you, and I certainly went through my time and realized it. And, it's amazing how good it is once you've allowed forgiveness into yourself and can move on and just live your life and let every day just be a day and not something to predict. So I want to give you a chance to tell people about your books and how to get them. So how can people, what are your 2 books and how can they get them?
Okay. My first book actually is Handwriting Analysis, Discover Your Own Vocational Career Potential. That's the first book. So if you're looking for a career, or if you're in high school, I basically wrote it for college and high school kids that didn't know where they wanted to go. And it's based on Dr. John Holland's vocational choice. He's written a book, and he does the most research for the government on vocations. I just piggyback on him, and it seems to work. And my second book is, of course, The Bullying, Applying Handwriting Analysis to Detect Potential Danger Signs and Effects. And it can be got from Amazon or Barnes & Nobles. And if they want to go on my website, they can actually purchase it off that too if you want that. It's handwritingconnectionct.wordpress.com. They can get it from there too. And of course, it's published by Outskirt Press, which they can go there and purchase it also.
Yeah, I think which is how we connected, because I published my last book on Outskirts. I got to tell you, David, I've done 50-something of these podcasts now. You may be one of the most fascinating guests I've ever talked to. I just really enjoyed talking to you, learning about something, at 48, which is what I'm at, learning something brand new. I had no idea about any of that. And I thank you for coming on the show and sharing with it. And I know that, when we first started, you're like, what's a podcast? How's this going to work?
Yep.
But, this now can be listened to at any time. It's not like radio where you had that one window to hear it. And I hope that a lot of people get a lot out of it, because you were fascinating to talk to. And I think that the book about bullying and handwriting is a fascinating area. I think I'm going to get it and I'll read your book.
I appreciate
we'll compare
it.
notes.
And I thank you. Actually, I thank you so much for having me, because I was a little leery, because I'd never done a podcast. Like I said, I'd never even heard of it.
Yep.
So I heard from you, and I'm glad you had me on your show. I mean, I could talk all over the place on handwriting. I just want to stick to, the bullying aspect of it. There's so many avenues to go,
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, that's what I think makes this fun, for me, and hopefully you had a good time talking, because we're talking about the things that we're interested in, and hopefully the people that listen get that. That's really the idea. So again, I mean, I'm fascinated, and I'm definitely gonna, I think, read the book and learn a little more about what graphoanalysts do, such as yourself, and how you make a difference in the world. So I appreciate it. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Alan.
This is Alan Eisenberg with Healthy You, and please join us next time.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.